Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for joining us for tonight. So the topic tonight is to build and contribute to winning teams, and how do we go about doing that? So we spent a little time in the back talking about hiring and the importance of that. So I want to talk a little bit about how do you actually go about approaching building a high-performing team? And does it start with hiring, or is there kind of another approach that you guys see it? So I'll start with you, Julia.
Oh, great, putting me on the spot. No, it's great. Thanks for having us here tonight. This is a really fun event. I think the most important topic to get to talk about in startups and really in any culture. I think for us, it's a combination. We are constantly looking for really high-performing talent across all functions that can actually work in a really, really urgent and rapid startup environment. And I think focusing on the right skill sets for the timing of where the company is maybe more important than anything else. You can be an amazing professional, but just not kind of fit in a really urgent startup culture. So we spend a lot of time on hiring. We've changed our processes a number of times to try to get that right, both for the candidate and for us. And then I think it can be really hard to build a great culture. We're in the early stages of that. When you're moving so fast and you're adding multiple people every week, being able to set values and have really good cultural individual leaders in each function that can start to seed those values, I think is the easiest way to do it effectively.
That's great. So, on this topic of culture, so you mentioned that, and, I know a little bit about all of your cultures, maybe a little bit the most about Favors, actually. So I'm curious, Jag, to hear from you, kind of a little bit about how you think culture really goes into the hiring process, and then how that translates to the teams that you have.
Yeah, it's difficult, probably where I would start. Look, it all starts with people. I think there are a lot of leaders out there who think that they can define and set culture. And the reality is that you really can't. You can set a good framework and set a good example, but it's all about your people. So when it comes to our culture at Favor, it is really been defined by our team. We created fairly early on something that we call the culture committee. And this is a team that rotates in and out. It's a team that exists for about, call it 4 to 5 months, and they're given some task to solve that is related to culture. And most times they come up with what that is. So, for example, Culture Committee 1.0, which was the first one that we put together, was tasked with coming up with the values of the company. And so, you see a lot of companies, particularly in startups, where it's usually the founders or the C-level executives who define what the values are. We took a very different approach to that and basically had our people define what the values are. Now, they didn't lock themselves in a room and come up with them. They basically talked to all their coworkers, and they spent months coming up with this. And I remember the first time they presented them to me, I was reading through them, and one of the values, they're actually up on the wall there. But they're not just up on a wall, they definitely are stitched into the fabric of our company. One of our values is own your shit. And the first time I read it, I was like, no way. Like, we're not gonna do that. But then when you've got a team of people sat in front of you saying, hold on a second, this is important, this is who we are. You always talk about accountability, you always talk about doing your best, and you always talk about taking responsibility for what you have. And so I think when you put culture in the hands of your people, you really get real results out of it.
Okay, can you guys hear me now? Okay, perfect. So I want to talk a little bit more about that, kind of the do you start with the people, or do you, as a founder of these companies or as an executive of a company, come in and actually set the, for all the founders here, or maybe entrepreneurs in the crowd, would you, and maybe Alan, you can talk to a little bit about this, did you come in and have the values that you and the executive team kind of created to inform a little bit of the hiring process, or did you follow kind of more of Favor's approach with, people developing it themselves?
Sure. Great being here. So, sorry about that. Thank you. So I'm probably a little bit different, and I think there's lots of ways. The most important thing is you talk to lots of people about their experiences and what worked and what. really loud. We could swap. Oh, we switched. Does that mess you up? All right, that works. Sorry about that. I know that's agonizing on your ears probably. So when I started, I'm kind of a non-recovering serial entrepreneur. So I'm actually terrified to switch what's worked before. So I did less on socializing and letting others come up with the ideas of what to do, and more just tried to start by being myself and be authentically who I am. Who I am as an ex-Army Ranger, so things like morals and honors and integrity and ethics aren't a punchline. It's like a fact of life. And we sort of overlay that by the fact that, you know, I'm going to get to eat today. I'll sleep at some point. I'm in Austin, so I'll see my family and nobody's shooting at me. So life isn't really that tough at the end of the day. So I think perspective and context matters. The only thing I care about for Phunware is that I'm wickedly open, candid, and transparent. That's it. If I'm wickedly open, candid, and transparent, and we do all hands meetings all the time, very different when you have 5 or 10 people than several hundred people. I think when you're thinking about who you hire, the first 10 are life or death for your company. If you're a founder, you have to hand select, know who you're getting, have a track record, because if you screw up the first 10, you're in a lot of trouble. As you get bigger and bigger and you're scaling and adding all these people, that's a much harder thing. So what I try to do is to tell everyone, I will tell you everything until I get in front of an all-hands meeting and it shows up in the paper, or it's tweeted, or if you have so little respect for me and all the things that we're trying to work on together, then I'm not going to be able to share. And please don't do that to me. And even pillow talk, I talk about that. That's probably not normally socially acceptable. But I said, I don't care what's going on at home. You have to respect, you know, our information. And as long as you do that, I'll tell you everything. And as soon as you don't, I can't tell you anything. So please don't do that to me. So as we hire, we try to say focus on results, not activity. A lot of people spend a lot of time doing a lot of things that don't really mean a lot. We're all salespeople. So no matter what functional area, if we don't bring in revenue, we're dead. So a lot of what it is less about trying to outsource it. I just try to be myself and be very open. And I probably provide the most brutal feedback of everyone you'd ever see. Because I say, I care about you, and I see in you what you don't see in yourself, and you're amazing. And I want to show you how to be that amazing. And we've promoted from within unbelievably. Because I'd rather have someone passionate, hungry, who wants to work to get that next uptick than find that magical person who I call a purple squirrel through some executive headhunter that doesn't know anything about what you're doing but are supposed to look good on paper.
Nice. So you mentioned, you know, kind of the growing team dynamic of a large company, and if you have, you know, a huge business, and how do you actually think about the team building aspect of that? So I want to talk to you a little bit about Cheryl. You kind of shared with us earlier that you're on track to open the 90th Kendra Scott store this year, which is amazing. And so can you talk a little bit about, with that amount of scale and that large of a team, kind of how, you know, the hiring process, what that looks like?
Well, I'll even take it a little bit back to acknowledging what you said about that first 10 people. I'm number 3. Janet, who is Kendra's mom, is the first employee. Denise, our VP of Design, is employee number 2. I'm number 3. And we have a core group of women that have been around for 9+ years. I'm on my 13th year now. And so for us, we built a culture. Yes, the culture began with the head point, which is Kendra. You all absolutely individually set the tone for your company. You want to, you need to, you have to. It's your company. But the individuals that are a part of the core founding team co-create alongside you. And so I've had the honor to co-create the brand and the culture along with Kendra. And for us, the pillars of family, fashion, and philanthropy are our guide rails. And what's fascinating is, while it began with Kendra, and those 3 words, concepts, were are very specific to her, for me, they mean different, but yet at the same time there's a collective understanding as to what family fashion and philanthropy mean to me. And when we are at such a rapid growth rate, we do have a core group of people that have actually been with us for a 5 to 7 year. We've got about 30 people that have been with us for 5+ years on top of the 8. So there's actually a pretty core group of us that it was kind of before we had it all written down and had it all figured out. You know, even since 2010 when we opened up our first store, retail store, everything has just been so fast. But we've hired then, and we've hired now, not like-minded, but like-hearted. And I will tell you, family first, coming back to that core family first concept, is absolutely essential to everything that we do. I'm telling you, you can look great on paper, but it is a heartfelt connection that if we don't connect with you during an interview process, through the heart, and we actually have a very interesting interview. It's kind of like a round table. I would not want to be interviewed right now because you go through so much, so many different departments. Anyone who may touch the new position, it's multi-department, multi-people, and it's a round table, and then collectively everyone comes together and says, you know, this works, this doesn't. It feels right, it doesn't feel right. Yes, they're amazing resume. Okay, that makes sense. And then we, you know, hire purple squirrels / unicorns and people ultimately that have the heart that, you know, and that really comes down to, are you a freaking good human being? And do you express that good human quality of kindness, thoughtfulness, caring, and in service to others? Okay, let's keep talking. And that is our success, and that is the only way you can grow effectively and have a really great team. And having 90 stores across the nation and international, and have how many different people and how many different stores. I mean, it's the only way we've found that works.
I love that. So, I mean, it sounds like a lot of kind of similar themes here. You know, you kind of find people that are a little like-minded, that agree with the culture and align with the culture and how that is important. But you know, what happens when we've all experienced challenges in hiring? Hiring is hard. You know, how does that affect kind of the team dynamics, and how do you, as CEOs and directors of business, how do you actually, you know, kind of filter for that or address that, or see it coming and deal with it in the moment? You know, how do you juggle that?
Yeah, specific around hiring or?
Yeah, when you have a hiring situation that maybe you thought you were getting someone, or you thought there was going to be a fit for the team,
Sure.
and then it didn't pan out. So what are some of the challenges from the team dynamics side?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a reality of any company, but especially in startups when you are building really quickly and you're doing the best you can. I mean, the first thing that I do at EverlyWell, if we get a hire wrong, is we look inward and we say, what did we do wrong with that position? Did we scope it incorrectly? Did we interview incorrectly? And what was not a fit for our culture? And that's a major responsibility for EverlyWell to take on, and it's our job to be sure that we are taking responsibility for wrong hires and learning from it. And so I actually make sure in interviews, I don't sell people on the culture. I'm very upfront about what we are and what we're not, and I try to do a really good job of, in some ways, scaring them a little bit, to try to be sure that we sell exactly what people are getting into, and there's no missed expectations during the interview. And that's really, really helped us. We, you know, of course, have had to go separate ways with team members. I think that is expected. People leave companies, sometimes roles shift, and it's also really important how you reinforce values with the team, and then also move on from those situations. And so it's a normal part of the growing process. You want to minimize that as much as you can and do whatever you can to prevent turnover. It's expensive for the business, but I've also learned it's part of the growing pains. One of my friends from business school, Katrina Lake, said, hire slow and fire lightning fast. I would say we haven't had that luxury. We've had to hire fast. But I do think if you know someone isn't a good culture fit, trying to make it work both for them and for the organization, it's often better to, give the feedback, address it, and really be respectful and help that person find their next opportunity.
I was going to throw something in on that, I think the other part is you're going to find for all of you, whether working at a company and hiring people or starting a company and building it, it's going to be really easy to know who's bad, like really bad, and who's really, really great. The biggest thing I see challenges as you get deeper and deeper in companies are finding folks that are completely, they're not good, they're not bad, they're just solid. But solid is a really difficult thing to manage because it could be that you have the luxury of those positions, or it could be that you really need rock stars, right? And that's the hardest thing, is to say, if you're kind of firmly in the middle, what do you do? Because it's not obvious that they're a star and it's not obvious that they're poor. You could say, I'm going to train them more. But there's a lot of issues where you have to be really truthful. I've seen people that are brilliant, and I've had to fire them really quickly because their personality is toxic to their team members because they're so brilliant. That's the hardest fire in the world, is that absolute genius that everyone around knows they're a genius. And it's almost like you have to break glass in case of emergency to introduce them into the rest of the people. So I think that, you do your best in reference checks and all the other stuff that goes with it. At the end of the day, you have to recognize when something's not working. And the hardest part, it's very easy for people to hire and add more people. It's really, really hard to recognize something's not working and take an action, because it's uncomfortable. I mean, people are people. And you never want to have to sit down and say, this just isn't working. And, that it's real, and the best you can do is the best you can do. And I found that if you have something that doesn't work, being very open and candid and helpful for finding something that's better. I've told people, if you don't like working at Phunware, if this isn't your dream job, come tell me. Let me help you find a better job than here. I want you to be happy, because if they're not happy, then what's the point? And there's no magic answer, and some will smile and they're unhappy. But I think it's just up to you to push that down to your organization as it gets bigger, because that's the hardest thing. When there's 10 or 15 or 20, it's a bit easier. You see everybody. Once you don't know who everybody is that works at your company, everything is dramatically different.
So you mentioned something really interesting about just kind of the roles and the types and the personalities that are at play in different teams. But how do you effectively motivate to inspire great teams to really work towards a common goal, or really do well and perform well in a project? I'm just going to throw that out to everyone, so you guys can chime in individually.
So I would say it really comes back to those early hires. A lot of this comes back to the early hires, and as you grow and as you scale, it's very difficult to replicate that. You have to be pretty surgical when it comes to hiring. It's great early on because what you'll see most founders and most kind of executives do is they'll go with known quantities. So people people you've either worked with before, people who are top performers, people who will be a good culture fit, people who can adapt and evolve with the company. That gets a lot harder as you start to hit scale, a lot harder. And then what it turns into is really identifying what are the key positions in the company that are not necessarily just about the role, but also broader than the role itself in terms of the effect that they can have on others. I think those are the ones, like for example, early on at Favor, I was obsessed with interviewing and being part of the hiring process for every single person that came in the door. And I think you find that with most leaders, especially early on. But you reach a point where it's very difficult to do that. And as a leader, as time goes by, you have to cherry pick the positions where you're going to play a role. And it's not like the textbook would say. It's not your most senior positions. It's the ones that are going to be deeply embedded in the company and the ones that are going to influence. And those are the people that you can have. We have weekly town halls. I'm sure like most of the folks here, to be transparent and share information. It's just not enough. even every week going through, here are our numbers, here's what our goals are, here's what the plan is. You need your people to work on your behalf. And so I think when it comes to influence, it's not just down to one individual, it's not the founder, it's not the CEO, it really is your key people.
And, just for the people that might be in... I'm going to pause for a minute. Okay. On the key roles part, and just kind of finding those team members that are really going... I can also talk loud. So with the key roles piece, you're talking about people that are really going to be the first roles at the company, maybe the first 10 employees.
Not just the first 10. Like the first 10 are really important. Like what we heard earlier, there's no doubt that the first 10, 15, 20, they're just critical. Your earliest employees are critical, and they're the hardest to find. Because what you're looking for early on is, quite frankly, what I would describe as jack of all trades. As time goes by, as the company evolves, it gets harder and harder actually for those individuals. Because what the company needs as the company evolves is domain expertise. So things do start to change. But just as important as those early hires, and as critical it is for the early hires to be kind of jack of all trades, as you start to grow and as you start to look for domain experts, you just have to be surgical about handpicking who those are. So it continues. It's not just at the beginning. There's no doubt that early hires are critical to a company. There's just no doubt about it. And it's very, very difficult to get that right. But it's just as hard to get hires right as time goes by and as you scale. Yeah, you're right. Look, it's difficult. Like it's interesting that we're here talking about culture, and what you're hearing, I think, from all of us is everything is about people, right? It's all about people.
If you think about countries, right? They weren't built overnight, and cultures have a language. They have a speak, a vibe, an energy, all the way down to the brand color palette, and is it called the fun committee or whatever it is. But to be in a fast growth company, you're creating, it is yourself, because you're all the individuals at the top, but it's also this brand new world of, well, unexpected. It's brand new. It hasn't existed before. Your company has never existed before you, and this energy that you're creating is, it's completely unique. And so what you have to go to are, what are the core human fundamentals that are the most important to you as a leader and to your leadership team? And that's like going on a date. Like, you've got your top 3 things that you like, you shouldn't negotiate. They could be hot and have amazing connection, but when it really comes down to it, do they actually have the heart, the whatever your top 3 things are, which you should identify what they are. And if they don't match that, don't get excited about the sizzle. If they didn't match that, then peace be with you. Go on.
Yeah, I love that. So, keys right now, choose your top 3 things and make it about people. So I want to switch gears here a little bit and talk about, once you actually have these great teams on board, how do you actually, make them effective? And, everything from open communication and trust, and just, can you guys kind of share some tips for how you make sure that you're actually running and operating effective teams?
So I'll start with this one because it's something I learned in the military by necessity, but I think it applies to young companies and companies as they scale, which is make yourself irrelevant. That's a really, really hard thing to do. Information and knowledge is power, especially when you get up into big companies, right? That's the way you protect your position. That's the way you get budget. That's the way you play, the politics of big companies that often we grow into what we hated at times. But what I try to do is tell people that, okay, I get hit by a bus tonight. Who's in charge? And then when they get hit by a bus, who's in charge? And you have to be able to build a culture that, I don't even know if I really believe in corporate culture. I think it evolves into you set tenets and it becomes what it is. You know, when I sold my first company to Cisco Systems, and they had a culture until they didn't. I think Dell here locally had a culture until they didn't. Bizarre Voice had a culture until they didn't. Everybody thinks they have one until they don't. And so what I try to do is to tell people, embrace the fact to make yourself irrelevant. The greatest thing I could accomplish as a CEO is for me to never have to show up. For everybody to do what they're supposed to, and if something happens to them, people are unafraid to use their skills and knowledge, make a decision that they think is right. And, you know, I tell people, I don't care if you make mistakes. We're all human. I screw up all the time. So now don't repeat the same mistake. That's just foolish. But if you get people who feel very comfortable, because when you're not around, or Kendra's not around, or the team's not around, you need somebody who's unafraid to make a decision because that customer needs help, that partner, that person. And then I also try to teach people that no matter what, life happens. And no matter what's going on in my life at Phunware, people are going to have problems at home. Kids are going to be sick. Someone will get cancer. Someone will die. It is inevitable. If you're not prepared for that up front, to say, how do we make sure that that person can take care of what they need to and we don't miss a beat? That's extremely hard unless you're planning to get people comfortable sharing everything, having multiple people in charge, and anyone can step in and be unafraid that, oh, I'm going to get punished, I made the wrong choice, or I need to check in. If everyone needs to check in with you as the leader, you will fail because it doesn't scale. And so the more you can have trust with people and they can trust that they're not going to get slammed because they made a decision, you're like, great, make a decision. I'd rather you violently execute today what's 80% right than wait 3 months to be 100% right.
I completely agree. I think that is something that Kendra has instilled in all of us, and something that is a part of the culture, which is absolutely being able to make the decisions. And it's like having an entrepreneurial environment where, as an individual, my name is not on the door, but I feel as if it is, because my influence and the decisions that I make do impact, whether greater or small, depending upon the day or the moment, the end result, which is the team and our customer. And to be able to always be connected to the customer and know that I'm influencing and am supported in making decisions, and that is the culture. That is completely right on.
Jagger, do you have anything to add to that, or Julia?
I would just say that if you're going to spend a lot of time, money, and effort on hiring the best people you can find, the best thing you can do is get out of their way.
One of our investors says, good CEOs are the laziest people in the room. I've been trying to implement that. I'm not sure how it's going. A lot of my team is back there, but I think that there's a particular skill set in the very early days. So our business doubled literally overnight over Thanksgiving, and we had 12 people supporting a $1.5 million a month business, and then we still had 15 people when that got even bigger, and they were working hard 24 hours a day, supporting this business over the holidays. And I think one of the hardest things to do is constantly adapt your team structure to continue to be effective very, very, very quickly. So the meeting cadence, the communication style, the hiring processes, how you motivate people, all of those things have had to evolve really, really quickly. And the ability to step back and recognize that and to be flexible around it in these very critical phases. If you get too stuck in one mode of operating, I think that can be just as detrimental. So, I think that absolutely you have to have the right people, but then at that point, your job is to make sure that they're able to do their jobs. I mean, I'm not very structured in my one-on-ones, but I try to always say to people, how can I help you? What do you need from me to unblock the work that you need done? How can I help you so that whatever it is you're struggling with, or you can't get a decision on, or you can't get X, Y, and Z done, let me help unblock that for you. And to me, that's the most important role that I can play, because that's something that I can help them be more effective in their jobs.
So you guys have each kind of mentioned, like one-off, kind of throughout the conversation so far, a little bit about team sizes. You know, we've talked about scaling, we've talked about startups, we've talked about the first 10 people, and kind of those key hires. What do you think about kind of these team sizes, and what is there a size that's too large? Is there a size that's too small? And what have you guys experienced on that? How that can be most effective?
I was employee number 1, so I feel like it's too big already. But that's from me. I think there's this weird phase post Series A where like you feel half as fast as you were when you were 3 people, and you were like 10 times faster. And yet collectively you have this organization that is in parallel getting so much more done, but it feels slower in a way. And so that's something, frankly, that I really struggle with as kind of the first person in the door, always moving super fast. I mean, we built our first website in 2 weeks. And so for me, that's something I really have to balance because it can actually be detrimental to the culture to be pushing people that hard.
It's kind of like an accordion of sorts, where I could say on average 5 to 7 people for most people is about right. If you're a CEO, you might think, okay, there's a CFO, a CTO, there's a head of engineering, there's a COO, there's these different positions. Each person is a little bit different. I've managed like 20 people before that then manage a bunch of people, and I've managed 2 or 3. Everybody's a little bit different in what they can handle. I always err on the side of pushing people, and then I talk to them and say, I'm going to keep pushing until you scream uncle. And I think you're capable of anything until you prove you're not. It's the same reason I believe you could go CEO with $0 of revenue to billions and billions until you prove you can't, right? So err on the side of assuming everyone's capable of anything until they either prove they can or say, hey, this is uncomfortable for me. One of the 3 founders of Phunware, when we got to probably more than just about 15 million of revenue, said, you know what, this is becoming larger than I'm used to be the CFO. And that was an amazingly noble thing for him proactively to say, I know where I'm good, and I'm good from 0 to 15, and I'm about at the end of where I'm going to be really effective. Let's work together and find someone. Most people aren't going to do that for you. They're going to say, I'm capable of anything, even if they're drowning. So I think that you have to kind of figure that out. Some people can grow fine. Mark Zuckerberg was very young and did great because there was a Cheryl Sandberg waiting there if he failed. And she was going to be the CEO. And that's how it works. And there was a young Michael Dell, and there was a Tom Meredith next to him. So there was a young Bill Gates. Every one of these folks do well until they don't. If you have a business model printing cash, you can grow up a lot over a long period of time and get good at it. If you're Evan Spiegel at Snap and under pressure because you're losing $1 billion a quarter, that works until it doesn't. Maybe he'll get there, maybe he won't. So I think there's no magic answer to it. I think that you have to feel comfortable just flowing with what's happening. And I think that in the world that I've lived in, it was very different when we raised our first $1 million. We've raised almost $100 million at this point. And you know what scares me the most? Failing every day of the week. Scares the living hell out of me. I don't believe anything can possibly go right. I'm a very optimistic guy, but I think you have to plan for nuclear winter at all times, assume the glass is half empty. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and it's actually turpentine, not water. Because if you plan for that, you're much better suited when inevitably crap is going to go wrong, because everything doesn't go right in a startup. And your job as a leader is to keep an even keel. The highs and lows are going to be daily, hourly, of all this great stuff, shitty stuff. We won the deal, we lost the deal. It just goes on. The VC's in, no, they're out. It happens, and you have to keep a measured, piece to that. But I'm scared to death. I have no right to exist as a company. I'm scared every day of the week. We never have enough. Something's going to go wrong. I'll be the first to say, shit, we got in a $3 million lawsuit with Uber last year because they didn't pay us. We were doing $22 million a year just tied to a relationship with that. And then all of a sudden, Uber blew itself up. They withheld several $100 million of payment. We were one of 50 that was all the way downhill. And welcome to your life as a leader. You're the little guy, and you're suddenly trying to fight in court for a simple payment. And meanwhile, they turn it into the biggest thing in the world, which is why all our employees are only allowed to use Lyft, by the way. So realize that every damn thing that's going to go wrong will go wrong. There's no good answers, and what you have to do is to figure out how to take curveball after curveball after curveball. Your job in a young company is to exist. That's it. Day after day, week after week, month after month, just exist. Be lucky as opposed to good. If you can be both, great. And if you survive long enough, good things can happen. But please understand, everything is going to be a mess at all times. And anything it's not, just embrace the fact that it's not. Because you have less people, less money, less everything than everyone you're competing with. And you didn't have the idea first, and they have more than you.
Those are great, Ellen. Do you have something to add, Julia?
No, very accurate.
So, you have these high performers that are coming into your teams and are coming into your companies, but in the early stages, you might have to mold them a little bit. You might have to shape them. So how do you actually go about shaping them into the highest performance team that they can be to really get them to that goal?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is there is no, consulting management training program. There is no time, and there is a little bit of a sink or swim opportunity. The good news is many, many people really thrive with that opportunity. And you kind of do on-the-job training, and people who pick up additional responsibilities or take on new projects are able to get that training as well. But if that's not an environment, you have to be a self-starter, you have to be self-motivated, and you have to say, I know that I'm going to come in with a lot going on and a lot of chaos, and I'm going to make sense and learn something out of that. Startups are actually a great place for professional development, because if you do an amazing job, you will get promoted and you will get to continue to lead. It's almost the only place where that is potentially a guarantee if the company is still in existence. In corporate America, it's the politics. You don't know what's happening with your boss. You don't know what's happening with the company. I mean, there's so many things that are not a meritocracy, and I would say startups are one of the better meritocracies that I've seen. It's also a place where young people who are really hungry and maybe who haven't quite gotten that next step have the opportunity to take that next step. We look for those people. We look for those profiles to give them the opportunity at the next level up, whether that's manager or director, et cetera. So I actually think it's the very best place to get professional development, but you have to be an individual who takes all that in and not someone who's expecting it to be given to you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think throwing people in the deep end is probably the best way to get experience very quickly. Look, I've been incredibly fortunate. Favor is my fourth startup, back to back over almost 2 decades now. And during that time, seen a lot of different things, good, bad, and try to take all of those learnings and continue to kind of improve. And one of the things that we've done at Favor as we've scaled is not just what Julia mentioned, which is definitely throw people in the deep end. It's a great way to learn. But as you scale a company and you bring in domain experts, you can, as a startup, put programs in place for things like on-the-job training. One of the things that we do at Favor, we call it an internalship, where you can apply for an internship in another function in the company, where if you're selected, and we select 2 a month, if you are selected, you basically go and work in a function that you may know nothing about, you may have no experience doing, but you're good at what you're doing currently. So we see that you have the DNA to do the job. If you ordinarily applied for that position at another company, you probably wouldn't get it. What it's led to at Favor is today we have about 40% of our workforce who are doing a different job from the job that we hired them to do. And I think you can do that when you reach a certain scale. It's very difficult to do that in the early days, and quite frankly, I wouldn't advise doing that in the early days at all. I would stay away from it as much as you possibly can, because there's too many things to take care of in the early days, and it really doesn't matter. But as time goes by, what you will find as you scale, and as you get to a certain point, and as you add more and more people are yearning for that. And usually as a startup, even when you're scaling, it's very difficult to have, you're still fundraising, and it's very difficult to basically say, okay, we're going to take this amount of capital and we're going to put it aside for, internal training or purposes like that, usually you're still running at full speed. And so if you can leverage the people that you have, and certainly the people that you hire later on who are domain experts, they also enjoy it. They love guiding and helping other people. And so programs like that help. My caution that I would kind of throw out there is just use good judgment and know the time to put that in place. Too early can be dangerous, and too late, you're going to lose some people.
Cool. That's great. Yeah, it's just interesting to hear kind of the internal mentorship that a lot of companies are doing more often. You were mentioning that at Kendra Scott, Cheryl, that there's some training aspects. There's a lot of kind of internal mentorship going on. Can you speak to some of that and how that's really affected the teams that you're working with?
Well, I would love to say that we have a formal program like you just spoke of, because that would be fantastic. And I know that that's one of the things that we've discussed as development and leadership, cross training and getting into someone else's shoes and actually getting into the depth of it. I mean, it also increases empathy. And empathy, again, going back to human connection, when you are empathetic to another individual, the world is a better place. Your personal world as well as the work world. And so I won't say we have a ton of really true development like that, but what we do have is, because we are an omni-channel business, we have wholesale, retail, and e-com. Our distribution center, which of course facilitates all of the e-com and basically ships out everything to everybody. We separate home office, the field, the retail field, and the DC, and we cross, I won't say train, but during high season, so during the holidays, everyone works several shifts at the DC. We basically roll up your sleeves, and depending upon your skill set, you're either a packer or a picker or a color bar hand setter. And I will tell you, the DC, some days I just want to go and hang out with them because they are so grounded in some ways, rooted in the culture, more so than our brilliant people that get in their heads and are analytically thinking about what the next XYZ is going to be in the home office. The DC is this really brilliant place of just roll up your sleeves, you got to get it done, in super, super fast pace, especially during the holidays when web sales are crazy and the pressure is on and wow, customer service is number one and so on. We tried out, not in 17, but in 16, for everyone who could also take shifts in the retail store. Unfortunately, the retail operations team suggested us not to do that because it actually caused some complications in their retail experience and really providing that wow customer service, because we realized how important it is to know the product, ins and outs. It's actually a lot more complicated, but at the same time, I love all of the different shifts, and I had a wonderful experience working in the domain during the high traffic in this like teeny tiny 900 square foot space, and everyone, they have a formula and there's a zone, and if you mess with that zone, you mess with the flow, and you just don't want to get in the way. And so anyway, long story short, that is how we've cross-trained, but it also provides empathy cross-functionally. And again, when you are in merchandising and you are planning the numbers that are translate into how many crates are coming into the DC and then how many units are going out the door, when you cross-functionally have that experience, again, empathy is knowledge is empathy.
We went through a lot of just being very humbled by the scale of the planet. Doing a lot of mobile. We went through, and everyone talks about these great stories of growth and scale and these problems you want to have, but are absolutely petrifying with people and systems and process and infrastructure. So we went from effectively 0 to now, today it's more than 1 billion monthly active user devices through over 5,000 application portfolios of the Fortune 5,000, 6 billion transactions a day. And when you think about the top 10 live events in the world that any of you have enjoyed on mobile, we've actually done every one of them. The Summer Olympics, the Winter Olympics, WrestleMania, the Oscars, the Grammys, the World Cup, the English Premier League. There's nothing more humbling than someone looking at you when there's $1 billion on the line for sponsorship and advertising with $500 million of digital rights. And you take folks that are both senior and very junior, and we don't really call it necessarily a cross-training program as much as trial by fire of you getting thrown in without your swimmies in the deep end, and God help you. Because you can imagine, getting a phone call from the president of Fox Sports, and then you shift over, and the next call is the president of Kaiser. And every one of them demand instant attention. And that's overwhelmingly crazy. When we had someone who we promoted from within, and she's done amazing and is now heads up all of our fulfillment, I had to one day bring her in my office and say, stand at my desk for a minute. She's like, what? This is the same person that when we won our first deals, when she was in the first 10 employees, every time we won a deal, we do a shot of tequila. And then we won so many deals, we had to stop that because it was like 9 o'clock on Monday, 10 o'clock on Monday. We're like, okay, we got to stop. But she's like, what the hell are you doing? I say, just bear with me. So you get up there and have this whole group. And I'm like, do you realize you reach more human beings on the planet than Sir Johnny Ive of Apple? And you watch that sort of set in. And I'm like, embrace this. Like, you get to touch humanity. We have this goal to reach every human being on the planet with a device that touches a network through their mobile applications. And we have almost 3 billion, I think, Phunware IDs now tied to all those. And it's amazing. So when we do cross-training, it's more like, hey, let me throw you into the Olympic Games where you've got 50 million real-time users and you need 0.01% downtime, and you're in the one strike you're out business, right? So we purposely try to throw people in and say, great, you're going to do sports this week, and then we're going to throw you into media and entertainment, and then we're going to jump you over to healthcare. Don't screw that up. Someone will die from 911. And then, and you try to make jest out of things that you can't really joke about. But I think when you throw people into those circumstances, it's not different than, I keep using the military, but it's very true. Like, you train all the time to go into conflict, right? And then what happens? A bunch of people go out and they execute the way you think they would. Other people go out and they freeze. Trust me. And you don't want to be with someone with live bullets when you freeze. That's not a good thing. And then you see like a movie, right, where you have a Congressional Medal of Honor winner who was a conscientious objector, who refused to even have a weapon, who then single-handedly saves 45 folks up on top of a ridge throughout the night while no one's there. And that's what's amazing about what I think young companies and scaling companies go through. It's often the people you would never expect that are amazing. Some of the folks perform as advertised, and then you have to find the folks, especially in young companies, that freeze. And that's where you have to find them and eliminate them because it's catastrophic, but it's life and death of your company. And those are really hard because you can find some of the most amazing people, and when you freeze in those environments, you have to recognize it. Sometimes you can migrate, sometimes you can't.
So we have about 5 more minutes, so I'm going to kind of throw a closing question to each of you guys. What role models helped you become a better team leader? A little cheesy, but... Any come into mind?
For me, it's actually been watching a few of our managers. I come from a traditional corporate background, business school degree, all those things, but I really shunned a lot of what I had in the corporate environment, from performance discussions, values, all those kinds of things. I found them to be very empty and not meaningful, and nobody was actually working towards a goal or to get anything done. And so what's been really inspiring to me over the last year is, as much as I like viscerally hate all of that, we have some really incredible managers on our team who have found a way to bring a lot of that into the organization and still make it really meaningful and about the mission of the company. And that's been a really big game changer for me, because it helped me kind of bridge that gap.
I'll give it a shot. So it's an author. It was Michael Lewis, who just has every amazing thing from the new thing of how to be an entrepreneur to Moneyball to also, like every book Michael Lewis had, I actually, this quarter, the required reading was the new thing, so everyone in our company would know, you know, what is a startup and how does all this actually work and how did entrepreneurs get in charge of things. As a founder, I would say Elon Musk and Steve Jobs are just unbelievably incredible to me. But the one thing that probably influenced me the most was not a person. I mean, you have your parents and your friends and all those folks you admire growing up, people you work with that inspire you. For me, the inspiration was an institution. It was just Ranger School in the United States Army, which taught me that the human body is capable of anything. Every time you feel sorry for yourself and think you've expended everything you have, you're not even at 40% of what you can deliver. And so the reason that I've probably had more success than others is you probably want to eat and it matters to you. You probably want to sleep and it matters to you, and I don't really care. And the last priority is things like food and sleep. That's unfair if you compete with me because you're going to need more things than I will. And so, right, you know, Ranger School taught me that everything goes wrong, you have no resources. But what it really does is for 3 months, if you only sleep an hour a day for 3 straight months and you get 1 meal a day, and you're put under the most physical duress you can imagine, you realize when you can function and operate at a high level, and more importantly, you can inspire others who are exhausted, who haven't eaten, who haven't, you know, had anything go right for them, that are miserable. And you can accomplish what you need to accomplish by inspiring them and making sure, both when you're a follower, that you can make sure they're successful and vice versa. It sort of sets a foundation where all this stuff is kind of easy.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Thank you guys for coming out, and thanks to Team Austin for having us. So we're going to open it up for a 5-minute Q&A if anyone has questions.
Hi, this has been great. I have a question. Like I know at Kendra Scott they offer manicures, right? So what are the, if all of you could answer maybe the 3 top things that you think are important for employee retention. So I mean, I'm assuming manicures is probably not it. It's more about something more emotional, but it could be it. But like, what are kind of the 3 core things that you think is the glue that makes people stick?
I think the first one for us is because family does come first, taking care of your personal family and yourself. I.e., if a child is sick, there's no question. They can even be brought up to the office. There's a flexibility there and a complete understanding. I mean, Kendra's a mother of 3, and it's just a known. There's never a question. If any type of family, you don't have to just be a parent. But that flexibility of this comes with trust and individuals who actually prove themselves. But there is true flexibility within the workspace and hours and things of that nature. I think that's first and foremost. Having a beautiful environment with lovely perks and food. I mean, it keeps people going. So yes, the manicures, that is a Kendra dream because she loves to have manis and pedis. And yes, anyone who, that's her world. We have nail lacquer because she loves that. And so she wanted to offer that to everyone in the office, men included. You don't have to get nail polish on your feet, but it's truly like, you know, everyone has that. But it's really like you can go in the middle of the day and take an hour off and go treat yourself. Not to mention manicures can get expensive if you do it weekly. And then again, coming back to the family piece, we have a wellness room for mothers, and again, it's creating an environment at the workspace that really helps to take care of the people where they're at. And so, whether it's our child, you know, friendly room or the mother's wellness room, it's creating an environment that is supportive of the family and the culture.
So for us, very early days, and so we have to be careful about how do we motivate and engage people with perks while also recognizing we're not yet. I would love to offer manicures, but not quite at that stage. But I think what we do have to offer is a really incredible seat on a really amazing ride. And we emphasize that a lot. We also emphasize that we pay people what they're worth. We regularly evaluate performance and give compensation adjustments and promotions as appropriate. Doesn't have to be on a cycle or anything like that. And we give people as much responsibility as they would like to take on. And for the right type of person, that is potentially the most engaging role that they could be in. We also have a strong, what I've been told, a lot of the reason people come to the company is our diversity. So we have made it a huge priority to only hire when we have a diverse pipeline of candidates from which to select. And a lot of people come obviously from what I look like and just from what the team actually looks like now. It's a huge priority for us and something that we think people are very, very proud to work for a company like that.
Yeah, I don't know that we found a silver bullet on this one, but one would be, I try to emphasize we really don't care about race, creed, color, sex, sexual orientation, or anything else. We just care about talent. We supplement that with the opportunity to have the biggest challenges in mobile in the world at the largest scale with the biggest brands where everything and everyone in the world. There's a difference of if you have HBO Go and it failed during Game of Thrones, that's non-Phunware. When you have things that don't fail, that's a big technical challenge. So a lot of people, we can give them this is the pinnacle of the biggest scale you can hit, and that's great. And then, I'm very honest with them how much I hate employees. I despise them and would like to hit them with baseball bats if I could. But I love owners. That's why we give everyone equity, right? So, I want them to spend every dollar like it's their last. I don't want to say there's not a single person in Phunware that doesn't have equity. It would offend me if they didn't. And that doesn't mean, you're trying to make everything market. There's base, there's bonus or commission, and then there's equity. But I think those are the big things that we try to focus on is, we're going to be very open with you. We're not going to look for gimmicks as to why you want to be here, but really challenge the intellect and talent that you have, give you an opportunity on a big global stage, treat you like an owner that we want you to be, and see if we can all really revolutionize how the world operates.
I think for us, the number one thing is giving you the ability to have an impact. It's very similar to what Julia said. A seat on this just fantastic ride. Other things are definitely important, there's no doubt about it. Particularly here in Austin, it's very competitive. There are a lot of startups raising money. So you have to have a good work environment. There's a bunch of things like that are just kind of standard, but they don't make the company. They just don't. And that's just the reality of retention. People don't stay at companies because they've got, people don't stay at, let's use something that most startups do, just because it's become commonplace, which is snacks. So I'll just throw that out, right? Because it's easy. Yeah, we have them here. It's an easy one to throw out, right? Because it's not unique. Every company has snacks, right? But the reality is that your best people aren't going to stay because you have good snacks. They're not, right? And so when it comes to retention, I think it really has become crazy, especially in the tech world. It's insane what's happening with perks and benefits because it's becoming so competitive. But the reality is that your best people don't stay for that. They just don't. They stay because they're fulfilled. They stay because they have the ability to make an impact. And they stay because also they have, it's the ownership piece. They have skin in the game, but not just skin in the game through equity. They have skin in the game because really what you want is you want your people to be stitched into the fabric of the business. That's what you want. And you have, when that happens naturally, it is wonderful. It is incredibly hard to force it, but that's what retention is all about.
Great question. Anybody else?
What kind of systems do you guys have in place early on and kind of as you scale going forward on hiring the right talent? Is there kind of like a system that you go through? Is it a hiring system, an HR system, or is it more culture fit? We have to just think about that, and that's how we interview and bring people on.
I think it's more the latter than anything else. I don't think there's a magic process or software package you can buy. I think that, again, it depends on the number of people you're hiring and the frequency with which you're hiring. Going from 1 to 100 really fast in 3 months is a very different problem than 1 to 10. And as you go through those, I think we always tried to opt on, we want to hire direct. So for more than half of our existence, probably going into 6 years, we didn't use a single recruiting firm, no contingent retained search. It was literally us, who we hired in that initial wave, and then who they knew, and that was like the path up to 50, 75 people, was to try to say, are you vouching for them? Will they treat every dime like it's the last one like we do? And I think that the culture overwhelms it, and then you cherry picking and trying to get trusted people from your investors, from your advisors, and especially the people that you brought on with you to build. That's the only thing I've found that's worked repeatedly in a somewhat predictable way.
Yeah, I mean, we do have projects, so the final step in our interview process, it doesn't matter what position you're interviewing for, you have to come in and do a management presentation on a particular content area. And we have found that that has changed who we would have hired for the role in many, many cases. And this is after multiple rounds of behavioral interviews. So that has been a great success for us. And I mean, the team is so tired of me. Did they do the project? What project are you giving them? When is the project happening? That whole thing. So, but it really, really has been helpful to understand how people actually perform, what choices they make under time pressure. Is a particular skill we're vetting for, and how do they operate? Can they actually deliver a great work product? It's not related. The project is it's a case study. It's not necessarily related to the business, but it's important for us to be able to vet talent that way.
Great. Any other questions?
So how do you spend most of your time? Is it getting the vibe of your people and understanding what's going on in the companies, talking to customers, and how much would you go into the day with a plan and just kind of flow with it?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure, I'll repeat the question. So the question is like, do you go in every day and have a plan for what you're going to do, throughout the day? Do you flow with just what's kind of happening? And how do you sort of think about scheduling and structuring things? I'll take a very brief part. Yes, I do have formal schedule, and then that which isn't formal, I try to leave open for the things that happen. Each role will have different hats you have to spin, from legal to sales to marketing and all those things. But I think overwhelmingly, what I find is the bigger and bigger your company gets in terms of the number of people, the more and more time all you do is focus on people. Mm-hmm. It's not that you forget your customers or your investors or your partners or any of that. But in order for you to be successful as you're scaling, you have to make sure everyone understands what's true north. At Phunware, we care about what is the best mobile application experience in the world, period. And you put that through that lens every single time. Like if you were at Amazon, you'd say more products, lower prices, faster delivery. Because 10 years from now, you're not going to say, give me less choice, slower delivery, and higher prices, please. Right? So if you can have true north and you know what that is, you don't have to be around, but they'll know it. But I think I spend 2/3 of my time dealing with people as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, because everyone is very well intentioned, but you have to keep everyone in sync, and that is a ridiculously hard thing, I think.
Yeah, I would just add that the calendar is brutal for founders and leaders in a company. My calendar every day looks like a game of Tetris. That is the way I would describe it. And it plays like a game of Tetris as well. Like, it is just moving and changing all the time. So one of the things that you have to do, and it's super simple, but it's a great tip for anybody who is a manager or even an individual contributor, where you just try to manage your day to day and there's a lot going on. It's just to block time every day, whatever the right amount of time is for what you're doing at the stage of your company, that is for your people. Very similar to really what you're saying, is that it does come down to being engaged with your people the bigger you get, in terms of size of employees. So blocking that time is super important. Otherwise, you won't get to it. You just will not get to it. Calendars just tend to take over your life.
It's hard to get on Kendra's calendar.
We have time for 2 more questions, so.
Yeah, so it's kind of piggybacks off that last question, but when it comes to a meeting or something like that, how do you decide it's worth it? Is it a case-by-case basis, or do you have
So the question was, when it comes to a meeting or taking an appointment, how do you decide if it's worth it, and do you have a principle? So for me, I actually send these to my team. I have developed templates around how to say no. And I have those templates, and if you are external to EverlyWell and you are not one of my core priorities for the next 30 days of the goal we're trying to achieve, I will not meet with you. And it has to be 100% rule. If it is not 100% rule, I would spend 100% of my time taking meetings that don't drive the business forward. And it is my responsibility to my company and to my investors and to everyone else. And so that, for example, before our Series A, it was, if you are unrelated to the fundraise, I'm not taking an outside meeting with you. And now it is, if you are unrelated to recruiting, I am probably not going to meet with you. And that is, it may sound harsh, but it's actually very clarifying. And if you make it a rule and something that you operate within, and people understand when you share that. But for me especially, my first year, I wasted so much time talking to people who wasted my time. And it was probably the biggest mistake that I made. And I had to get very, very strict and very clear on how I was going to allocate my time and who got that time. It's the only resource you have. And as Jack said, my calendar's back to back to back, and it has to be something you really enforce and are really careful about. Otherwise, you'll find yourself at the end of a day or the end of a week or a month having accomplished nothing.
I'll also talk about the fact that that's brilliant. And also, as a leader in the company, also encouraging people to get up from behind their computer and go have a conversation versus putting a meeting on there that everybody's like, what the heck is this meeting about? Because it can literally turn into this, like, all you're doing is going to meetings, and what are you actually accomplishing? And it can actually become a part of the culture that, like, slows everything down, and everyone is completely unmotivated because they're like, why did I just go to this meeting? But, well, XYZ person said that I need to go. It just, don't yourself create a meeting and encourage others to not put something on someone else's calendar, without having a conversation first.
So for me, the only thing I've tried to do very, very differently maybe is to realize, and your focus when you're just starting and you're getting going in the first year, and as you're going, it probably changes a little about how extreme you may get. And I think focus is great early on. What I actually try to do is a little bit different sometimes, which is find things that no one's invited me to, but I find meetings, right? And so I try to actually make sure, because what I want is everyone at any level of the company in any functional area to have a relationship with me as best as I can, even though that's really, really hard. I don't want them to think like, oh, he's the guy that works on the board and has his little staff. And so for me, like today, I did a meeting with HCA, and it was the first ever meeting with this particular regional group of HCA, and it was with the inside sales desk. It came in through a lead, through demand generation, dropped in, never talked to him. There was a 30-minute window, and we set it up so I would be with 3 brand new inside sales folks and show them how me with the head of sales would take 30 minutes as an opportunity, trace all the things that went on at Phunware, go through every objection they could possibly have, and end the meeting with a meeting a week from now, who they said, we want to do business with you. And they're sitting there like, we do those 30-minute meetings, and we can't even get someone to follow up. And so I try to do that, or if it's QA and you have something and you dive deeply and you analyze the build and they don't even know that you did, and you send back, here's all my feedback of all the mistakes I found. That sort of got the attention of a lot of people really fast. So if you have sort of this healthy version of randomness where you're going to show up and anyone in the company is likely to have those meetings, I think you always need your formally scheduled stuff, but I think it's super important to maintain a connection, the onboarding process, getting people set at their desk, jumping into every functional area and jumping in the team meeting and just participating, because sometimes people look up and they're like, oh, why are you here? And that, one, I think it helps them prepare better, because they suddenly realize like anyone from the board or CEO could just show up, and that's probably healthy. I think.
Great. We have time for one more.
Romance was easy. Having a child was another story. That was like completely. Go.
I'm going to scare you. And
And then
no,
I'll
this is
go.
going to be, I will bare my soul to you. All right? Important. I was married, am not married now. I was married for 21 years. I had 4 children. I have 3 daughters that are 19, 17, 16. I would say I've always advised people and never would have guessed in my wildest dreams I would have ever ended up not being married. And I would say the reason I'm sharing this is because you should understand that when you pursue your passion and dream, you know, my wife and I started, ex-wife, started with nothing, literally nothing. Met when I was in the military. We had debt. We had no money at all and went from absolutely nothing to an American success story. We had everything. We lived in Silicon Valley. We lived in coastal Orange County overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Wonderful kids. And you watch something go terribly, terribly wrong. And it's all different. You see lots of people in their 40s that are all having midlife crisis, guys, women, whatever. And I would say, so I have a wonderful romance right now with a dentist that I met subsequent to being married. So there is life after, but I would tell you, you have to understand, are your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend on board with you when you are going to pursue that dream? Because there are no free lunches. It's brutal. You can't simultaneously be a dad at home of 4 kids and run a company and not have something give. You can't travel for investment or customers around the world and always be there. And so that'll be something I'll live with for the rest of my life about, you know, trying to provide and pursuing something and caring and worshiping someone and watching it still go wrong. And now, I would never trade any of I had 21 years of spectacular. But that's the harsh reality that I'll share about myself because that's what happens. But
It's
romance
really,
is
really
good.
hard. It's really hard. It is. I mean, so my husband and I are both entrepreneurs. He travels for work. He sold his first company and travels 4 days a week. We don't have friends in Austin. We moved to Austin 2 years ago. It's a choice. We don't have time for friends. We don't have family in Austin, and we work 24/7. Now, we choose to work 24/7. It's an important distinction. We love what we do, and he's fully committed to what I'm doing in this process. But it is a choice that we've made, and we've understood what we've traded off in order to be here. And I think anyone who tells you that it is not everything that you read about, it's a wonderful, wonderful experience, a wonderful process, but it is that much work and that hard.
I had a great Valentine's Day, by the way.
It's hard.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for coming out. Let's give all the speakers and Royal a round of applause.